You've been sitting at your desk for 3 hours now, staring at the same document, and your brain feels like it's trying to run through thick mud. But yesterday, you reorganized your entire living room at midnight, deep cleaned the kitchen, and started learning Italian on a random app you downloaded at 2 in the morning. And the weirdest part? You weren't even tired. You felt alive. Today, you can barely respond to a text message. If this sounds familiar, I need you to understand something right now. Your brain isn't broken. It's not lazy. It's not failing you. It's an ADHD brain, and it's been running on a completely different operating system this whole time, while everyone around you kept handing you instructions written for a different machine. Let me paint you a picture of what I mean. Imagine your brain is supposed to have this steady, reliable fuel system. Most people wake up with a tank that's reasonably full, and it drains slowly and predictably throughout the day. They can plan around it. They know they'll have energy for work in the morning, a meeting after lunch, maybe some chores in the evening. Your brain doesn't work like that. Your brain wakes up, and sometimes the tank is completely empty, even though you slept 8 hours. Other times, it's overflowing, but only for things that don't matter right now, like researching the history of ancient Rome when you're supposed to be paying bills. The fuel doesn't come from sleep or rest or good intentions. It comes from interest, urgency, novelty, or sometimes just pure random chance. And when it's not there, no amount of willpower in the world will make that engine turn over. If you're finding value in this, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button and leave a like. It helps more people who need to hear this actually find the video. I really appreciate it. Here's what nobody tells you about living with an ADHD brain. The exhaustion isn't just physical. It's not about being tired in the normal sense. It's about how much energy it takes to exist in a world that wasn't designed for the way you process information. Every single day, you're translating. Someone gives you verbal instructions, and your brain has to work 3 times as hard to convert that into something you can actually hold on to. You walk into a room and forget why you're there, not because you're careless, but because your working memory is like a whiteboard that someone keeps erasing every 30 seconds. You start tasks with full intention, and somehow, 2 hours later, you've done everything except the one thing you needed to do. And the worst part? You feel guilty about it. You feel like you're failing at being a functional adult, when really, you've just been trying to run software that your hardware wasn't built for. Let's talk about what actually happens inside an ADHD brain, but in a way that makes sense without all the clinical jargon. Your brain is supposed to release a chemical called dopamine when you complete tasks, when you make progress, when you do things that are good for you. That chemical is what makes you feel satisfied, motivated, and capable of doing the next thing. It's the reward system that keeps most people moving forward through boring, difficult, or unrewarding tasks. In an ADHD brain, that system is unreliable. It's like having a rewards card that only works at random stores on random days. So your brain learns to chase the things that do create that dopamine hit. Novelty, hyperfocus, urgency, conflict, intensity. This is why you can spend 6 hours building a website for a project that doesn't matter, but you can't spend 6 minutes filling out a form that actually does. This is also why deadlines suddenly make you functional. It's not that you work better under pressure because you're some kind of adrenaline junkie. It's that the urgency finally creates enough dopamine and norepinephrine to kickstart the system. Your brain finally has the fuel it needs. But here's the cost. That fuel is artificial. It's not sustainable. It's borrowing energy from your future self. And when the deadline passes, or when the crisis ends, you crash. Hard. You feel completely hollow, emotionally flatlined, physically wiped out. People see that crash and think you're being dramatic or lazy. What they don't see is that you just spent 3 days running your brain on pure emergency power, and now the bill is due. One of the most painful parts of having an ADHD brain is the gap between what you know you should do and what you can actually make yourself do. You know you should reply to that email. You know you should make that phone call. You know you should start that project, go to the gym, clean your space, follow through on the thing you promised. And you want to. You genuinely want to. But there's this invisible wall between intention and action, and no amount of trying harder seems to break through it. So you start to believe the story that everyone else seems to be telling you, that you're undisciplined, that you lack willpower, that you just don't care enough. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that your brain isn't producing the neurochemical bridge between thought and action. It's not a character flaw. It's a neurological reality. And then there's the hyperfocus. People hear about ADHD and think it means you can't focus on anything. But that's not true. You can focus. Sometimes, you can focus so intensely that the rest of the world disappears. You forget to eat. You don't hear people talking to you. You lose track of time completely. Hours pass like minutes. And when you finally surface, you feel like you've been underwater. This happens because when your brain finally latches onto something that delivers that dopamine hit, it doesn't want to let go. It's like someone who's been starving finally finding food. You're not going to stop eating just because it's socially appropriate. Your brain is trying to get as much of that neurochemical reward as possible before it runs out again. But the world doesn't understand that. The world sees you ignoring responsibilities, missing appointments, forgetting to respond to messages. The world sees someone who's irresponsible. What it doesn't see is someone whose brain is just trying to survive in an environment that doesn't naturally sustain it. Let's talk about the guilt, the shame, the constant feeling that you're somehow failing at being a person. You've probably spent years watching other people do things that seem impossible to you and wondering what's wrong with you. Why can't you just get up and do the thing? Why can't you just remember? Why can't you just focus when it matters? Why does everything feel so much harder for you than it seems to be for everyone else? And because you can do some things, sometimes even amazing things, people assume you're just not trying hard enough the rest of the time. They don't see the inconsistency as a symptom. They see it as proof that you could do it if you really wanted to. And that makes the guilt even worse, because part of you starts to believe them. But here's the truth that you need to hear. Inconsistency is the most consistent thing about ADHD. Your brain doesn't have a steady baseline. It has peaks and valleys, and they don't follow a predictable pattern. You can be incredibly capable one day and completely unable to function the next, and both of those experiences are real. Neither one is more true than the other. You're not faking it when you're functional, and you're not being lazy when you're not. You're just working with a brain that has a variable power supply, and you've been doing it without the manual. There's also this thing that happens with emotional regulation. Your emotions don't just exist in the background like they do for a lot of people. They're loud. They're immediate. They take over. Something small happens, something that wouldn't bother most people, and suddenly you're completely overwhelmed. Or someone says something mildly critical, and it feels like your entire sense of self just collapsed. This isn't you being overdramatic. This is your brain struggling to regulate emotional intensity, because the same system that manages attention and impulse control also manages emotional responses. When that system is inconsistent, everything is inconsistent. Your emotions feel too big, too fast, too much. And then you feel embarrassed about that, which makes it worse. Here's something else that doesn't get talked about enough: the mental exhaustion of masking. If you've spent your whole life trying to appear normal, trying to keep up with everyone else, trying to hide the fact that your brain works differently, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've learned how to fake attention in meetings. You've learned how to nod at the right times, laugh at the right moments, pretend you heard what someone just said even though your brain was somewhere else entirely. You've learned how to apologize for forgetting things, for being late, for missing details, for all the ways your brain doesn't cooperate with the world's expectations. In that act, that constant performance of being someone you're not, is exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to people who've never had to do it. So what does all of this mean? It means that if you've been struggling your whole life and couldn't figure out why, if you've been calling yourself lazy or broken or defective, if you've been wondering why everything feels harder for you than it should, there's a reason. And the reason isn't that you're failing. The reason is that you've been trying to operate a brain that works differently without understanding how it actually functions. You've been blaming yourself for not meeting standards that were never designed with your brain in mind. Your brain isn't broken. It's just wired for a different kind of world. A world that rewards novelty and intensity and interest instead of repetition and routine. A world where hyperfocus is an asset, not a liability. A world where inconsistency is expected, not punished. You don't live in that world, and that's made everything harder. But understanding this, really understanding it, changes things. It doesn't fix everything overnight. It doesn't suddenly make executive function easy, but it does take away the shame. And that matters more than you might realize. Because when you stop believing that you're the problem, you can start working with your brain instead of against it. You can stop trying to force yourself into systems that don't work and start building systems that do. You can stop measuring yourself against people whose brains operate on an entirely different set of rules. You can stop carrying the weight of thinking you're not enough, when the truth is, you've been enough this whole time. You've just been trying to prove it using the wrong measuring stick. Your brain isn't broken. It never was. It's an ADHD brain. And once you understand what that actually means, everything starts to make sense in a way it never did before.